Hello, I'm Kathy Fox Alfano, host of Born TV's Primary 22, Why Should We Vote for You? Today I'm welcoming Kim Driscoll, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Kim, thank you so much for coming down to Born. We'd really like to get to know you better.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Great. First, Kim, tell me, what does the Lieutenant Governor do?
You know, I think the Lieutenant Governor position is one that's really pivotal in this Commonwealth. It certainly has a formal role, chairing the Governor's Council, chairing the Local Government Advisory Council, chairing the Seaport Economic Council. But I think more importantly, if you think about any organization, whether it's a state, a city, a private sector organization, an institution, it's never really just one person who's running the whole show. You rely on a team of folks to help influence the agenda, implement the agenda, and move things forward. And this Lieutenant Governor role is critical. You're a key confidant to the governor, a key partner in carrying out that agenda, and really working hand in hand collaboratively to attack the issues and challenges that we have in this Commonwealth. And I think we have a fair amount of them, and I'm hoping to be able to use my experience as mayor to help Governor Healy administration in doing the work that's going to benefit our communities at the local level.
What would you do with the office that's different from today?
Yeah, I think there's some things that frankly have been consistent that we'd want to keep in place. The formal, obviously, roles that I mentioned, but the last administration and the one prior, Governor Baker, Karen Polito, Governor Patrick, Lieutenant Governor Murray, the Lieutenant Governor role was a key liaison to cities and towns. You know, there are 351 communities in Massachusetts, located in different places, different needs, unique regional, issues that impact them all. And you really want to be able to have, a close connection with our communities. So much of what local government does, I think it's the branch of government we rely on the most, educating your kids, keeping your neighborhood safe, investing in those places you make memories, ensuring that there's opportunities for economic prosperity. And no city can really do that alone. So as Lieutenant Governor, you really need to be a strong ally and partner to our local cities in championing the work that they need. The second pivot for me is a key issue we're facing in this Commonwealth, and that's housing. You know, Salem used to be a place you could afford, to live if you were pouring coffee or pouring beer for a living. We had a service industry. Frankly, a rich mix of people, different incomes, different backgrounds, different races, different languages. And that's really under threat, not just in Salem, but in so many places, certainly here on the Cape as well. Knowing what the high cost of housing is doing to the character of our communities, I think we're going to have to lean in that space. And we've been working hard on that locally. I've been working hard on that as a state leader as we think about housing choice. And I really do feel like that's going to have to be a focus, day one getting into this office, to partner with the next governor to make sure we're attacking this housing crisis and making opportunities work on the ground for so many places that right now they just don't exist.
So what experiences do you have that we need in a lieutenant governor?
Yeah, when you're mayor, I like to say there's no hiding. Direct accountability all the time. You're making decisions for people that you know that you're going to see the next day in Market Basket or on the youth soccer sidelines, that you're going to really be impacted by those decisions, and you're not going to be able to hide. And in my estimation, it creates, one, a leadership that's a better listener. You really are understanding what's happening in your community. And two, it makes you more accountable because you're going to have to explain it to people you know and like. That sense of urgency and that accountability is something that I hope to bring to Beacon Hill, to be able to partner with our next governor. And just frankly, being an executive at the local level, we're not going to solve the most challenging issues facing this Commonwealth, whether that's housing, whether that's the climate crisis, the transportation woes, strengthening schools. So much of this pandemic has been felt by our students. The kids are not all right. We have a lot of work to do there. All of that requires action at the local level. That's a language I speak and one that I love. I've got strong support from local elected officials, and we're going to need that partnership to really address sort of the fabric of this Commonwealth. If we think of what we do as a tapestry, a lot of it happens locally, and I want to be able to strengthen those relationships and make sure that we're thinking about state resources, state know-how, and sometimes getting the state out of the way to support innovation. And that's a special skill set for me, being an executive, being forward-thinking, and being someone who has those built-in relationships that I hope to put to use going forward.
How would you work with Maura Healy? Do you have different skill set than she does?
It's an interesting question. We've known each other for a number of years. I'm a big fan, grateful that she's been our AG, leading some really important battles nationwide, just a real standout. I think that we could be good partners for a couple of different reasons. One, we're both college hoop players. She played hoop in college, I played hoop in college. We know what it means to be a good teammate. We know what it means to be successful. It's great to have individual success, but when you're having a aligned vision and you're working together, that really is, extra special. And two, her experience has been terrific as an AG. She's really shown her executive chops and the type of leader that we need on issues that are important statewide and nationally. And I have experience at the local level, the nuts and bolts of governing, the things that you really rely on. I think that makes for the strongest team. Heading in January, whoever is in office, we own the transportation woes. We own the housing crisis.
Right.
We own the climate work that we need to do. We own early ed and the needs we know we have there. Those are issues that I've been working on at the local level. Those are issues she's been working on as a state leader. I think it makes for a powerful combination or a really strong team in January.
I almost hate to ask this, but have people commented on having 2 women in the top ticket?
There definitely have been comments, mostly from the media, I will say.
Okay.
I don't hear a lot of it from voters. They want to know what you're going to do about the issues.
Okay.
And there's folks who are super excited. We've always had 2 men. It's never been even an issue.
I know, nobody had asked
right?
if it was 2 men. Yeah.
Right? Nobody would have a question or raise an eyebrow about it. For the folks who are excited about there being 2 women, I think that's great. I was the first woman mayor in Salem. During that race in 2005, people talked about, was Salem ready for a woman? We heard that, and once you're elected, the issue is put to bed. Forget about it. I think here, when I hear it, I say to folks, look, I'm excited about the sort of experience that we'll be able to bring to the ticket, but really, I think we're actually the most experienced team. Like, make it a resume race. I still think you land in the same place, and would be excited to sort of make history with 2 women in the corner office in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
But equally as excited that we have just the strongest team in January that can help solve the challenges that people in this Commonwealth are relying on us to do.
Here in Bourne, we have 2 very concerning environmental issues. We're looking both at Holtec, threatening to dump radioactive waste into Cape Cod Bay, which is just on our north side, and the possibility of a wastewater outfall in the Cape Cod Canal, which is very near homes, beaches, where little kids, are swimming. Yeah. What can you do to help us stop these potentially environmental disasters?
Yeah, I think it's outrageous that this is even being considered. The Cape is such a special part of Massachusetts, frankly a special part of this country. It's a precious resource and we ought to treat it that way. I would certainly want to join with a vast array and delegation of leaders, both at the federal level. I know both of our senators, our congressperson from this district, Congressman Keating, our state senator, Susan Moran, all of whom are said this is ridiculous. Either of these projects and initiatives that would do anything to hurt the jewel of Cape Cod, what we all rely on, not just for the quality of life and beauty, but this is a part of our environmental resource. This is a part of our economic health. It would make no sense for us to do any sort of harm. The idea of dumping, radioactive waters, wastewater into the harbor is offensive. I'm glad to see EPA recently has stepped up and said this is not in compliance with a permit. This is not going to be permissible. And we need to think about the wastewater challenges as well. And I also think these are areas where we can be brought together, especially around the wastewater challenges in the Cape. We're not going to be able to grow or take on the sorts of activities that we need to ensure that we have roofs overhead and economic prosperity if we don't think about this as a region. And it does feel to me like the Cape as a region has come together to think about how do we address wastewater. A lot of work has gone into planning and engineering and design. Now, obviously, we need to make sure we're not doing anything that's going to harm this beautiful, estuary and this wonderful environmental resource that we have.
I agree. Now, we have another big issue here in Bourne, the bridges. Both bridges are in Bourne. How can we rely on the State House to make sure that the bridges are designed and constructed with the least amount of interference in our daily lives? How can you be involved and help us with that?
I think it's a really important issue that you raised. We all want these sorts of infrastructure investments made. We know how critical they are, and it's a gift to the next generation. It's our turn to sort of take this task on. But how do we do so in a way that limits the impacts of the quality of life to the extent that we can? As someone who's managed construction projects in my community, big and small, certainly this is a larger scale initiative, and the state will be taking this on. This obviously isn't going to be a municipal project. State and federal resources coming together here. Some of the success we've had, and frankly, whether it's a big city block in the heart of your downtown or a major thoroughfare like what we're talking about here with the 2 bridges, in my mind, bringing stakeholders together early, making sure everyone's aware of how we're approaching certain things for mitigation efforts, and seeking input. You know, the folks on the ground locally normally have a lot of the best ideas in terms of how you can do workarounds, what's going to impact, what timetable, when can we do this work that will be the least impactful, how do we bring people together to make sure they know. Things like, you know, look ahead, so we all know what to expect and avoid what's going on right now. The tea is shutting down for a month. We just found out now, and it's happening in a couple of weeks. Those are the sorts of surprises that really frustrate people and can cause, you know, obviously huge negative impacts.
Right.
It's going to be noisy, it's going to be dirty, it's going to be dusty, it's going to be disruptive. How do we work together to ensure that we're limiting all of those things from happening, knowing that it's a big project and there's no way you're going to undertake it without somebody feeling it. If you know up front, if you know what to expect, if you can have input on what those mitigation measures are, it can go a long way to making it a little bit more bearable when we make these major investments.
Does the Lieutenant Governor get involved with that sort of thing at all?
You know, generally I would say, you know, you're going to have a transportation sector overseeing this with project management, but there's influence that I think Lieutenant Governor can play. You know, I'm the mayor, I'm not managing the major project downtown, but I'm the one who's going to hear from constituents when they're impacted. So it behooves me to make sure I'm understanding what's going on and that we're charting the best course of action. And that's where I think you'll see influence from the governor's office, Lieutenant Governor, to be able to make sure we're addressing needs as well as we can. And when state agencies are acting unreasonably, that's not okay. And who do you go to? You know, you go to the top. And I'm used to the buck stops with you and being able to get involved and hopefully influence things in a good direction.
I have to tell you, so far, there's been designs shown on the on the internet that we should look at, and then when you have a meeting, they say, "Oh, those designs aren't right," and they aren't. I mean, it's very frustrating, and I don't know. We don't know the timing. I mean, people say, "Why are you worried? It will never be built when you're alive," and I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's knowledge is power, right?
It's very frustrating.
Yeah, that transparency piece is really critical. Even when we don't know, I have found my constituents, if we're not sure about saying something we're not sure, like we're going to tell you what we know, we're going to tell you what we don't know, and we're going to seek your input. That can go a long way towards building trust that you need when you're managing a big project like this.
Right. Housing on the Cape has historically been difficult. Now it's crazy. I'm not talking about finding a beach house for the summer. I'm talking about teachers, firefighters, people in, in the service industry, people who are medical workers. They can't find an affordable place to live. What can we do about that?
You know, I think it's the #1 crisis facing Massachusetts for a host of different reasons. For me, having a safe, affordable, accessible roof over your head is really a moral issue. I just think everybody should be able to live in a place that's decent, and we know it's key to the social determinants of health. If you don't have a stable roof over your head, you often don't have enough to eat. You also, your public health suffers. You can't get to school the way you need to, or certainly learn the way you need to. We know the challenges that exist. It has never been this bad.
I know.
Salem used to be the affordable community. We were a place that you could pour coffee or pour beer for a living. We're a huge tourism base. We need a service industry.
Yes, yes.
We also need a care economy where people are caring for young children, caring for older adults. And right now, those folks are really threatened by living in our community. Right. I can tell you what the aha moment for Salem around this issue was when we had a housing production plan that really drilled down and better, evaluated what do we have for current housing needs, what's happening with the current population, how do we address the stark contrast between the housing needs that we have and the housing that's getting built. And what we found were, hey, good news, people are living longer, hooray. Bad news, we don't have enough housing.
Right.
And when we go to build new housing, frankly, a lot of it's unaffordable for the people who are living in our community and who are relying on it because it's market-based. And frankly, it's expensive to build housing. The land is expensive, the equipment, the labor, all of that. So we started looking at strategies that we could employ together as a community to address this, whether that was leveraging public land. We've evaluated building housing at our high school. That could be for custodians and our food service professionals and our, our paraprofessionals and our educators. We looked at community land trust and our Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board. Is there a role that we could play in either using public land or purchasing land that we would then hold the ownership of to drive down the cost of building the housing? We got a little bit more comfortable with density. If we want to build housing, how much of it inside of the private sector is building could be affordable? How do we make sure it's as much as we can get without tanking a deal so that we're not going to have any housing and that will hurt everyone? Because frankly, we need more market rate housing. We need more housing for workforce, which for us is like 60% of area median income. Wow. And we also need subsidized housing for the most vulnerable members of our community, finding housing first models, trying to think about how we work together to approach this, both private sector our housing nonprofits, and working with state officials at a time where we have historic resources. Can we close out that low-income housing pipeline? I had an opportunity to meet with HAC, the Housing Assistance Corp, in Barnstable, and really, a premier organization that's serving housing needs at every single level. And there are really innovative strategies that they're a part of, that the private sector is coming together. But oftentimes we have people in our community who really push back at housing. And trying to understand how we can come together to realize when we say no to housing, we're saying no to our child care workers, we're saying no to our young adults, we're saying no to folks who want to age in place and may not have the type of housing they need in their community to do so. And I think the state can really champion that. We do have some legislation that's been adopted through Housing Choice. I think we can amplify that. Right now it impacts some of the MBTA communities. If you are living in an MBTA community near a rail or adjacent to one, you have a requirement to put in some multifamily housing zoning in your city or town. How do we think about carrots and sticks from the state government to help address this housing crisis? If you're not concerned about it from a moral issue, you ought to be concerned about it from a competitiveness issue.
Right.
We have a lot of people moving out of Massachusetts, and frankly, the next generation may be the generation that doesn't do as well as their parents.
I know.
That's so scary to me as a mom of young adults that they may not be able to buy a home or certainly a home in the community that they grew up in or near it.
That's true.
And that means that's on us. That's on us to sort of say, what can we do? How do we work together? How do we bring the folks who build housing? Most cities don't build housing, right? But with the partners that do. I serve on our Housing Authority board. Just one example of what are the vehicles that we could amplify to address some of the housing crisis. But it's got to start with people in our communities, in the state, and frankly the private sector. Who stepped up to the plate in Salem is our employers. Our hospital president said, I can't hire CNAs. To your point, I can't find doctors. I can't find nurses. Housing's a key part of all of that. That's a crisis that we have to lean in on. And the really tough part of this challenge is, even with all the funding that we have right now, if you started building right now, it would take a year, at least before things are online. So we've got to get serious. We've got to dig in. Carrots, sticks, revenues that go into this, and really community members recognizing saying no to housing is saying no to the people we really care about.
Yep. Public libraries are very close to my heart. I'm the chair of the Public Libraries Board of Trustees.
Love it.
But trying to renovate or build a new library in this century, for this century, is a very arduous and decades-long prospect. Our library is from 1925. What can you do to help us add more funding and get an easier process for libraries?
So I'm on my library board of trustees as well.
Oh, good.
And I believe that libraries are really the great equalizer in our community. These are the places that, we have an old historic building, a former sea captain's mansion. That's our library setting. It's a building.
Ours is an old school.
Okay, so perfect. It's a place that is in a neighborhood where there's very little parking, and yet we have some of the highest, circulation numbers. And it's all about the amazing staff in places that are just so giving of themselves to help with whatever anybody's coming through the door looking for. And we know libraries are doing so much more than a place you just go and, take out a book. There's a lot more resources, and they've really adapted. But the buildings need to adapt, right? The infrastructure inside needs to get better. And we hear that as well when we're thinking about public safety buildings, public services buildings. Right now, the Commonwealth has programs to support cities and towns when they're building new schools, right? The Mass School Building Authority, it exists because we really believe schools are an important need, and how do we modernize buildings? We don't have a program like that for libraries. Well, I shouldn't say that. We have a small program, right? We don't have a robust program.
A very long list of people.
Exactly. So we have a small program that doesn't really meet fully the needs of the libraries throughout communities, and really no programs if you need public safety buildings or public services building, also services that really communities rely on a regular basis. And these are investments that you're not making every 20 years. These buildings are, 80, 90, 100-year investments, and they need support. I'm hopeful that we can think about reframing of this partnership between the state and the cities to really help matching dollars, additional grant dollars, all the federal money that we have coming in. It's one-time resources. So let's use it for one-time capital expenses that can lead to longer-term economic prosperity. I just read a story in the Globe about the Boston Public Library, BPL, is starting a program for entrepreneurship in their library. We know libraries can help unlock the potential in communities and be a real resource, but they can't do it without about modernization, and you can't do modernization without dollars. So I really hope we can, in a position with the Commonwealth where we've had enhanced revenues coming in. We started with gaming, and then it was cannabis, and now we just approved sports betting. These are going to be new tax revenues coming into the state. How do we make sure more of that gets down on the ground to communities where everyday people can take advantage of opportunities where they live and see these benefits as they move forward? Senior centers, another one. The state used to be a partner in. Community life centers, we call them. We built one. So we need a resource plan to make sure we're assisting communities with these really vital assets on the ground.
We definitely need that. Thank you. As mayor, I know public education is a big priority for you. What can a lieutenant governor do to directly affect schools?
I chair the Salem School Committee in Salem.
I've
had 3 kids. Yeah, it is not boring. It's not boring being mayor. And I can tell you that this pandemic has really, affected our children in a very different way. I know people are, and COVID showed us the future. That we've reframed maybe how we go to work, what our schedules look like, how we undertake that. The kids were really disrupted, not only not being in school for all that time, being in front of screens, but not being with each other. And we know peers learn from peers, and we're still seeing the throes of that disruption. Unfortunately, I think communities are being left to sort of tackle, hey, how are you going to handle this on your own? We've got some dollars, some federal dollars came down to school districts called ESSER, sort of the ARPA version of public ed. And that's a good thing to help with academic, disruption that we're seeing and deficits that exist in all of our schools. There's lots of shortages of staff in just about every school district, and we know there are needs. But how are we thinking about the strategies that we can deploy to address the social and emotional needs? How are we listening to young adults? Some of our young adults, frankly, even before COVID, the school setting, the environment wasn't really working well. We teach high school pretty much like we did when I was in high school, maybe when you were in high school. But our kids are graduating into a whole different world. And they're telling us what they want. They want credit for community service. They want credit for jobs. They want to know that what they're learning during the day has a connection to what they're going to be doing as a career. More vocational schools, all of our vocational schools have wait lists, more vocational programs, even within our existing, comprehensive high schools, where oftentimes we thought of the career services program or, as sort of less than and places for kids who maybe weren't going to go to college. And now I think we really recognize these careers are really worthwhile and lucrative and necessary. So how do we support our students getting a mastery and finding their passions, not thinking of high school as a chore, but thinking of it as an opportunity. Starting later, like many of our high school kids have talked about the fact that, and we know the research shows the whole circadian rhythms, right, are really after 8 o'clock, maybe after 8:30. Can we make those shifts? How do we think about the strategies that can be deployed? As I mentioned, community service, older kids working with younger kids, some of that peer-to-peer interaction that could also help with the social and emotional needs. Right now, it's up to every single school district. And while we love our local autonomy, it'd be great in this particular role, I think the power of convening, to be able to bring people together. We've got a lot of brain power in Massachusetts. We have a lot of talent within all of our school buildings, but everyone feels like they just stormed Normandy coming out of the pandemic.
I agree.
So we've got to be the marshaling force that sort of works with DESE. And hopefully DESE is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. How do we make them a little bit more of a partner and less of an auditor to work and convene? I think this is the role the governor's office, lieutenant governor's office can really lean into. We're not in our schools. We have local autonomy, but can we convene the best ideas and make it easier for our school districts to employ these strategies, knowing what our students are like, creating some flexibility among the requirements that we need to follow that's going to boost students' engagement. All of our schools are seeing chronic absenteeism, and the need for us to really lean into listening to young adults and defining a system, an educational system, that not only is going to lead to them being critical thinkers, but finding joy in coming to school and embracing the work.
Now tell me, I have read that you are benefiting from an independent expenditure PAC that's funded by wealthy Republicans. Have you disavowed that?
If I'm being funded by wealthy Republicans, they're going to be sorely disappointed. I only know what I read in the newspaper about this. We haven't seen any evidence of it. We have been head down, getting to every corner of this Commonwealth, talking about issues that voters have on the ground. And that's housing, that's transportation, that's early child care. As a mom of 3 myself, who at one time we had 3 under the age of 5, I know what that means. And that's what most people are interested in. I don't know even what I would disavow. I don't know anything more than what I read about in the Globe.
Okay. How about charter schools? Where do you stand on that?
So we have a really very active charter school in my community, and while families have that choice to go there, they're not breaking the law. It does take money away from public schools,
Right.
and that's always the concern at a time when we need resources. Anything that's draining schools from us to support something else, frankly, it's really harmful. It doesn't cost less to heat the building if you have less kids in a school. And while I appreciate the families who want options and choices, let's have an option and choice that doesn't necessarily negate the role of public schools in our own local home school district. And we've been able to do that. We've got we've got 3 innovation schools. These are schools that work a little bit differently, have different hours, or approach learning a little bit differently. And we've really tried to embrace making sure we're being thoughtful and innovative, and being forward thinking in terms of meeting students' needs. But we're able to do that in the district, right? With support and using that local autonomy to our advantage.
So Kim, tell us, why should we vote for you?
Well, I really feel like I've been mayor the last 16 years in Salem. Prior to that, I worked in the city of Chelsea as they were coming out of receivership, first as their chief legal counsel, and then later as their deputy city manager. Really taught me the value of good government, and frankly, who pays the price when there are failures in leadership. I know we need our communities to work. When we have thriving communities, we're going to have a thriving Commonwealth. I understand as an executive what I like to say from the get stuff done branch of government, where there's no hiding, you make decisions that impact people's everyday lives. You are more accountable, you're a better listener, and there's a sense of urgency in solving problems. That's the voice that we need in Beacon Hill. Frankly, that's the partnership we need with our next governor. Someone who's been on the ground. And I'm really hopeful that I can champion the work of cities, be a strong partner to Governor Healy, move Massachusetts forward, and do so in a way that recognizes what we do in state government has an impact on the quality of life in the places people live, not just in Boston, throughout this Commonwealth.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kim, and best of luck in the upcoming primary, which is, yes, the day after Labor Day. So please watch this on Born TV, and this and my other interviews can be seen on borntv.com. Please watch, meet all the candidates, you be the judge, vote.